So it gives me great pleasure to welcome K.C Belitz, Director at Nebraska Department of Economic Development, and his panelists to the stage.
Thank you very much, and we are in the dreaded spot after lunch and a warm afternoon in the room. Now, the good news is we truly have a stellar panel, which will provide you the kind of content it takes to hold your attention over these next 20 minutes or so. And if it makes you feel any better, when I left Nebraska 2 days ago, it was way hotter than this, so it's okay. We are very pleased to provide you a worldwide perspective on scaling up bioproduction with today's panel. Really privileged to have a panel of leaders in that space who are going to share their personal and professional experiences in doing exactly that, reaching global markets, and certainly look forward to the insights that they will share. I'll introduce them here so that you have, you know not only who you're hearing from, but also have the opportunity to connect with them here in just a bit. As was mentioned, my name's K.C Belitz. I work for the Nebraska Department of Economic Development, and the reason that we have as a department been this interested in this particular event and in welcoming all of you in September is that the governor of the state of Nebraska, Jim Pillen, is certainly very interested in this space, and when the boss is interested, so are we. And so we are very pleased to be a part of this. So let's begin by introducing our panelists first. First, we are pleased to have Billy Hagstrom with us. He is co-founder and CEO of Bluestem Biosciences. They're headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska. They are building novel yeast biology to ferment commodity chemicals in existing anaerobic infrastructure all across the United States Midwest. In the middle is Sarah Jelken. She is Vice President and Industrial Segment Leader for Cargill Starches, Sweeteners, and Texturizers North America. In her work, she has a deep understanding of circular solutions through plant-based materials and the steps that it takes to scale up production. And finally, Tim Bauer, Vice President for Green Plains Incorporated. Tim leads the commercialization activities related to the development and deployment of its distributive low carbon intensity clean sugar technology. So again, these are people who are living it every day as we talk about what it takes to scale up to meet global demand. So we'll start with, I think we'll just start with Billy here on the near end and work our way down. So in the journey of scaling your business and or partnering with companies to scale up, what are the key challenges that you've lived through, and how have you mastered those challenges?
Yeah, mastered not yet, but living and enduring it right now. So what we've tried to do is think about how we can take out the capital intensity of scaling up and getting to that path of commercialization. So we've done it through 3 phases. One, we're based in Omaha, Nebraska. We've not built a lab. Usually early stage biotech companies spend the vast amount of their early stage capital formation into building a laboratory facility. We have 4 international partners building our strains and building our biology across continents. So check, we didn't have to build a lab. Then secondarily, one of the unique features about the Midwest United States is there's existing pilot infrastructure capacity that's suitable for our biology. So that takes away a $50 to $75 million pilot facility complex that we would also otherwise have to build. And we'll be approaching that in first quarter of next year. And then in the end state, what we look at is the ethanol industry, where there's 210 pieces of hardware, these bioethanol campuses, and Bluestem's building our biology to change what can go into those facilities. So we view it as a software upgrade to the hardware of those bio campuses. And so what that does is it greatly reduces the capital intensity of our path to commercialization. Putting it all together, this is going to be an incredibly difficult journey. And so what we've tried to do is down select from the number of full-time employees we have and outsource a lot of that collaboration to thoughtful prior advisors and leaders in industry that come from the Cargills and the ADMs of the world.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, thank you. My role, as K.C mentioned, on the leadership team of Cargill in North America for the corn milling industry, I think a lot about our facility in Blair, Nebraska. And we've been in the wet corn milling industry a long time. In North America, we got into it 60 years ago, and corn milling's been going on for hundreds of years. But in wet milling, we entered the industry 60 years ago, and we built our Blair site. We started construction in 1993, that facility, and it's one of our foundational sites to this day. It's a very strategic site, 650 acres. We unload 500 corn trucks a day on the campus. We make over 12 kinds of products. 5 different companies are there, so it's a huge facility with a variety of partners. And when we think about that, what really matters is the ecosystem that you're creating on the campus and the challenges that that can create when you think about all the different goals, purposes, and objectives that there has. So you really need to create a united vision for the campus and align people beyond that. And that includes working with government partners. It includes working with the partners and their different objectives for the site. And so I think for us, it really kind of starts going back to that foundation of what you each want to achieve. Even things like thinking about your values as an organization and what really matters. So even things such as safety at the site and basic principles around safety and things you're going to do. And so I think from the very beginning stages, it's finding partnerships. And when you think about raw materials, and a big part of what Cargill brings to that relationship is the raw material sourcing, it really comes back to some of those foundational things and finding that right partner to work with.
You bet.
Yeah.
Tim, how about challenges and successes for you?
Yeah, awesome. So Green Plains, for those that don't know, has traditionally been a biofuel ethanol company. And about 3 years ago, they started on the journey of really transforming themselves to be a more value-added ingredient supplier, both from a protein perspective and then this clean sugar technology that we are in the process of deploying today. To Billy's comment, right, is really to expand the opportunities beyond the significant infrastructure that exists within the company, right? Significant amount of assets that are in the ground, and how do we best utilize that to make the world a better place, right? More sustainable and bio-based processes. So one thing that, I mean, time and money always comes up as a big challenge, right? But one thing that I just want to highlight is organizational effectiveness and culture, right? So Green Plains was coming from a very commodity-focused ethanol, very low margins, trying to do things as thin as possible. The capabilities, the critical capabilities that are needed to be successful in that are very different than the people, the skill set, capabilities that are needed to be a value-added ingredient or further down the chain perspective. So that's a key challenge, not one that's overcome and actually recognized within Green Plains, is that there has to be a different set of people, talent, organizational structure, right? They didn't think about food safety and quality management very much. They didn't think about regulatory, yes, as it relates to ethanol regulatory, but they didn't think about that a lot. Operational efficiencies and just how you manage complex operations and complex products, supply chain, customer service. There's all these different functions that you really need to build a different capability set. And that's a big challenge. If you're a startup that's really just from 1 or 2 people growing to 10 people, that can be a significant shift. Green Plains, obviously, 900 people, had an established corporation, had an established culture, and people that were doing really good at their job, but that's going to be a little bit different as we go forward. So that's a big challenge, right, that I think people tend to overlook, is just the organizational side and what is really needed to not be successful today, but be successful in the future.
Yeah. It does my heart good to hear all 3 of you refer right off the bat to partnerships and collaboration, because that's just deep in the ethic of the state of Nebraska and the way we're trying to do the work. So recently, Cargill announced a partnership with Voyage Foods to scale up and deliver sustainable alternatives to cocoa-based products. Green Plains announced a partnership with Shell to add value to an ethanol production process for the results of sustainable aviation fuel. That was a wonderful event in York, Nebraska a couple months ago. So what are those key things that your companies are looking for in a partnership? You want to start with that one, Tim?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, creating good partnerships takes time, right? Like you have to really start early, right, and build that up over time. So, I always think of you got to find the win-wins, right? You have to find the things that both sides are really, really good at. So, the example of Shell, obviously, Shell is a large petroleum-based company. We are a small little biofuels company in grand scheme of things, but they have a technology, and we had again an asset that we could utilize, and we had our own separation technology that we could add on to theirs. And we also have marketing capabilities, not necessarily for the fuel side, but we had marketing capabilities on the co-product side and some protein products that would be coming out of that process. And so there was a real natural fit in regards to, what are the synergies between the two companies. And I think starting that off soon and really working on developing that, identifying what those are, is really how you really build really, really strong partnerships.
You bet. Sarah, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that complementary strengths that Tim was just mentioning a little bit about. I think when you're thinking about a partnership and what you would be looking for, I think you want to find someone who has strengths in other areas that you would have. And so often if you think about an organization like Cargill, we have a lot of experience on the raw material side, a lot of experience with bringing things to scale. But there could be areas where markets we may not be familiar with, for example, and so finding a partner that has experience in that space often is a good partnership. But I think, to be successful with that, as you were bringing that question forward, you really have to find that common goal that you're both looking to achieve and really aligning around what does success look like and what are the practical things that are going to make that happen, and aligning also on time. I think one of the panels earlier today was talking about reality of the timing and what investors' expectations are, and I think making sure you have that alignment and the checks on kind of technology and that time frame and getting parties aligned on that is really key. Just to have those kind of expectations clearly mapped out is really important for stakeholder management.
Maybe just to add one thing, K.C.,
Please.
is the other thing is I think industry participants tend to kind of put themselves in a very narrow tunnel with other industry participants, right? So I think that from a partnership perspective, you have to kind of take the constraints off and look outside of where you would normally look. Because I think there's tremendous, especially in the bio-based processing industry, I think there's tremendous opportunities to partner with companies that you might not think of today. They might not be right off the top of your head, right? But they have, again, certain a complementary skill set or capability that you don't have. And they might be, to be honest with you, I was telling some of this, they might be in the petroleum industry. Although we're non-petroleum, right? Everything's around non-petroleum, but you need to have, I strongly believe you need to have both to survive, right? Because I don't think one actually survives without the other one. Same thing with like proteins and alternative proteins. You need to have one to have the other one. Think outside your normal. Don't think of them as competitors or like, hey, we're against them. Think of them as, hey, we need the capability. A lot of these companies have huge capabilities, huge skill sets that us as a bioeconomy, we're going to need in order to get where we want to go.
Yeah. And I will say from the broad perspective of an economic development organization at the state level, I think the time is now for all that. We're seeing it every day, where in the past we would work with one prospect, one company. Now it is almost always a partnership between 2, 3, 4, and we're working on how do we bring that to Nebraska in our case. Billy, I'm going to ask you to comment maybe on a similar question, but maybe from a bit broader perspective, because as you alluded to, you're working different continents. So as you think about like a legislative framework or some of that larger context around that, what have you seen that either in Europe or the U.S., wherever, is going to either help or hurt your ability to scale and grow what you want to do?
Yeah, the United States experience right now and the amount of funding going towards sustainability from an industrial policy perspective it's breathtaking. Yeah. I mean, we've never had such a change and a shift in the psyche for how corporates need to not only create solutions-based targets, but also then adhere to them. I mean, because we're an early stage company, we've got a help wanted sign that I agree with this panel. We need to work with the incumbents of those that precede us. Those are fossil-derived companies today. We're going to make a bio-based chemical that will require similar infrastructure. But the piece that's really unique now is that tying together the targets of the incumbents that come before us with the innovation and technology of Bluestem, you're seeing these odd bedfellows now start to come together in a weird way. And it's inspiring. We're in the right rooms. We're only 2.5 years old at Bluestem. We've been in Europe for the last 12 days meeting with the giants of the incumbents that precede Bluestem, and they're taking the meeting and meeting 2 and meeting 3. The last bit that I would just add to that is being in a state like Nebraska is an added superpower because the framework for building the bioeconomy goes all the way up to Governor Pillen at the top. And then having that federal programming with magnetism back to the state level just drives incredible connectivity. So we're lucky to be in the United States. We're super lucky to be in Nebraska because it's helping us connect those dots.
Right.
And maybe if I could just add one thing. I think the other thing that both of my fellow panelists have hit on is in a lot of the work that I do ties in with the bioeconomy. And one thing I think that's interesting is, at least in the United States, which I'm much more familiar with the policies and things, because frankly, knowing the policies for the entire world would be very daunting because they vary widely. And I know they vary by country, by city, by state in our case. The bio-based economy, we talk about, it says in here $4 to $30 trillion can be the size, but it is a drop in the bucket compared to the fossil fuels. And so I will tell you, at least in the United States, which I'm more familiar with, they are not threatened by it at all. If we do the very best we can to grow it, it will not even be 10% in like 10 years. We can work as hard as we can to replace everything. If everyone in this room does every single thing that they can to grow their products as big as they can, I'm not even sure it will be like 20% replacement of petchem in 10 years. So I think, we just need to keep pushing. We need to scale up everything that we can do because there needs to be a pathway, but we really need to get the end brands. Like I love seeing the brands like L'Oreal and others that are here, Tommy Hilfiger, talking about it, because that's where we need a lot of the pull and things to come, a lot of the government, kind of the regulation, a lot of those things seen, because there's just so much out there that it's not going to come from a push. We really need a lot of the pull to happen. There's just huge opportunity, I think, out there. So we're not a threat to the petchem. They don't hate us at all. They don't feel threatened or concerned, I don't feel in the slightest, in the United States that I know. Could be a different dynamic in other geographies, but they're not threatened. They're not trying to shut it down or stop it. It's just a tiny little amount compared to a huge thing they're doing. If anything, they want to be a part of it. So it's really not a problem they're fighting. If anything, they're slightly interested in being a part of it. So
yeah, good stuff. All right, panelists, we'll ask you to kind of sum up in a 60-second closing thought. Just where do you see the biggest opportunities as we think about, again, growing global scalability? Where are the opportunities that you see? Billy?
Yeah, I'll start. When we started Bluestem, we had really just 2 boundary constraints. One, how can we build biology or design biology to sit in existing infrastructure? And then 2, how do we use anaerobic metabolism just like yeast makes alcohol? Inconvenient truth, you can't make a lot of things, but you can make some things really well. And so we've designed the biology for what has the best and most favorable techno-economic assessment. And in our case, that's embracing commoditization of large-scale chemicals. And those have big carbon impacts today that we can reduce and also go after markets that largely end up in consumer products, because I do think aligning your decarbonization story with that consumer pull, with that corporate responsibility is going to be really important for our commercialization.
Awesome. Sarah?
I'm an economic person, not a science person, so mine probably won't be that inspirational to everyone. But I think that if you think about the economics of the world that we're in today and everything following the pandemic and things happening around the world, we have a lot of aging infrastructure. We have a tightening around capital in some environments and a loosening in others. And I think that the interesting challenge for us will be thinking about the constraints that we have and the opportunities and how we take this push and pull and leverage those assets and the capital that's available and make that work in the environment we have today. So we have a lot of facilities, we have a lot of people willing to invest. How can those opportunities scale up and do that with the infrastructure that we have today? So I think about things like drop-in replacements, because you already have downstream material. So instead of creating something new that creates something totally different, how can you leverage existing infrastructure so that you don't have to build huge new facilities, for example? I think you need a mixture of both. I'm not pushing one or the other, but I think trying to be creative that we can leverage some of the infrastructure we already have will economically help speed some of that forward.
Awesome. And Tim?
Yeah, I mean, I think Sarah stole my answer. I completely agree. I was going to say, we need all of it, right? And all of it is exciting for me. I lean from a priority perspective, molecular identical materials, right? If you can make the same thing as exists today, but on a bioprocess, that's where you're going to get the immediate bang for their buck. I think all new materials, new molecules will come along, and they're very, very, very important for the eventual. I just think from a speed and a timing perspective, right? For me, I place my bet on the things that are identical, that are drop-in replacements. The other stuff is great. I'm a big fan of all the bioplastics, PLA and such. It just, right, it takes time to, like it did in the petroleum industry, it took time to develop applications and then get the functionality exactly right. That'll all come and is all really, really important. But anything that's drop-in, that's where I place my bets.
Wonderful. Billy, Sarah, Tim, thank you very much for sharing your insights about scaling up to a global market. If you'd like to learn more, not only learn more, but see more, we will put in a shameless plug about joining us for BioInnovations Midwest in Omaha in September. We would love to see each and every one of you there. We will roll out the red carpet. We will hear from folks just like this, and we have decided to set the air conditioning at 66. That's the target.
Fahrenheit.
That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.